Thank you all for coming along. The Bayside Business Network, for those of us here who haven't heard about it, are sponsoring this night for us. I'm actually one of their ambassadors, believe it or not. It's got to be the greatest value of all time. It's $105 a year. So you get 3 absolutely fantastic breakfasts. There's another one coming up in June, which actually has, I think, 3 or 4 entrepreneurs who are going to be on stage. And they're high quality speakers, and they talk about everything that's made them successful as well. We also got 15 ambassadors. Any ambassadors here? I can see Tim here. Yep, great. There's a few of us here. Each one of us get a night like this where we come along and talk about our area of expertise, and you get to come along to those for free as well. They have these networking nights once a month. Now, these nights are absolutely gold. You go along and there's somewhere between 50 and 120 people there, and you all just sit around and have a drink in a bar. It's all paid for. Well, not the drinks, the food is. And it's just a terrific networking thing, and it's absolutely highly recommended, the whole network. I was going to introduce you to a couple of people from the network. Not everyone's old and professional. Is Julie here? Where is she? Mills. Where are you? There you go. What do you do?
I've just decided to come along to a few of these events with my mum, just to do some more networking and put myself out there and be prepared to graduate from uni and get into the business world. Yeah,
good. And I asked Julie, I said, one question from a point of view of being a business owner, entering into the digital age, what's the one thing we should all be looking at doing? And she mentioned to me that 60% of people who watch TV nowadays sit there with a tablet, an iPad or something like that, watching it. So what advice have you got for people?
Well, another fact is 1 in 5 Aussie homes have at least one tablet, so whether it be an iPad, iPhone. So my advice would be to make sure your website is compatible with mobiles and tablets. So a mobile optimized website, and a lot of businesses also have mobile apps, which are really handy. So that's the way everything's going at the moment. It's a huge trend, and everyone should take it into consideration.
Oh, thank you. I can highly recommend this girl. She really knows the stuff if you want to have a chat to her. Look, I always start my seminars with an investment clock, but a lot of people have been to that, so I didn't bring that along this time, so I'm going to spare you that, Colin, sorry. But I thought I'd go with a dad joke, okay? So my daughter loves dad jokes. It goes along the lines of don't do it and you're embarrassing. But what do you call Bob the Builder when he retires? Bob. Okay. You can laugh. It's really funny. But look, I think the key there is what we do for a living actually defines us. Like, I'm Steve the accountant. Okay, so Bob was the builder, I'm Steve the accountant. And I think for all of us in small business, whether we're Tim the financier, whatever we do, Andrew the pub owner, greatest job in the world, whatever we do for a living really defines us. And I think those of us in small business, if we actually stop for a moment and think about what we do, it's actually a genuine reflection of who we are as people as well. And that's why a lot of what we do and what I want to talk about tonight is actually so important. Right, this book here, I wrote about 7 years ago. You can't get it anymore, all the copies are gone, but if anyone wants a copy, I'm more than happy to PDF a copy across. It's called Big versus Boutique, and I wrote it out of frustration. I had a whole bunch of friends in particular and clients who'd gotten to a stage in business where they'd been building their business. Now, we all know if we are in business, when it's just ourselves, we're very excited and we're very hungry usually too. We're out there making sure we put our heart and mind and soul into it. Okay, we're very proud of what we do, and all of a sudden business starts to come to you, okay? Business really pours into you. And then you get to this point where you reach your maximum, okay? It does take a couple of years. So I call it, we're standing on a riverbank, to use a metaphor. We've grown to a point now where we've got too much work for one person to do, and we've got to take the next step, okay? Now this is what I call, we're now small business. We've either got to make a decision to plough into a river, cross that river to get to the other side, which is being a big business. Okay. There's another one I like to talk about. It's called boutique, and that's what I talk about in this book. Boutique is you don't actually cross the river, you walk up the riverbank and you find a nice estuary and become profitable from there. So the argument I'm going to present tonight is, should I grow my business big or should I grow my business boutique? Okay. All right, so we're standing on this riverbank. Okay, anyone feel free to jump in at any time. Okay, we're now too busy. We're going to employ people. Put your hands up if you employ people. Okay, there's a few of us here. Some of the costs. Yell one out. What have we got? Training costs. Excellent. Wages are a big one. Exactly. Yep. Payroll tax eventually. Super. Work cover. Does it keep going? Yes. Just keeps going. Okay. So what actually happens when you go from being a small business where all the money's yours, all the profit's yours, all of a sudden you employ someone, take a guess, what happens to profits? Straight down, okay? And you know what else? Someone yelled out training before. You're training people as well. Does that take time? Okay, so not only is your time gone, you know, your profits are going down with it as well, okay? So going big is a big step, okay? Because you are going to lose more money. But the vision is we're going to get to the other side and we're going to make more money. Okay, but we are going to lose more money. Initially, we have to take that on board. It's going to be more stressful. And the worst thing you can do is jump into the river and say, I'm going to the other side, get halfway across and go, it's too hard. You know, you've just committed too much time, resources and money to it. Big, when we go big, you know, this is where accountants get excited. We talk numbers, okay? The key point, and I like to get the key point out nice and early for the topic. The key point when I'm talking about someone growing a business is cash flow, okay? Cash flow. It buries us all eventually, and I'm sure you're going to talk about that. Yeah, okay. So my key point, and if you get one thing out of tonight, other than my other key points, is it's not all your money. Okay, I see it all the time as an accountant. All of a sudden, money starts pouring in the door. What do we do with it? Spend it, okay? The worst thing we can do is spend it on more growth, okay? Usually, without putting any side of it, because this compounds the problem. Okay, so the key thing we've got to remember, with this money coming in the door, it's not ours, okay? It's not all ours, because we've got to put it aside for staff, we've got to put it aside for the tax office, GST, you name it, okay? So what I do with clients when they come in and they want to grow their business, I sit them down and I say, put a percentage aside, okay? So for tax, I normally say allow 20%, okay? Because we do have a lot of businesses. For GST, what is it, everyone? 10%. That's 10%. It's not so bad if you're actually a builder where most of your money is being spent or a lot of your money is being spent on buying things, you get a GST credit. So if you're a builder, I'll say allow about 5% for your income coming in to be put aside for GST. But if you're a physical trainer and you don't buy much stuff, you're looking at about 10% you need to put aside. So it does depend on what you're in, okay? So you have to have a budget. You've got to remember, every cent that comes in is not yours, okay? You've got to put some aside. Fund your business. How are we going to fund the business? I'll tell you how most people fund their business from profits, yeah, cash flow, exactly right. So what I'd recommend to people, keep your business activities separate. How do you do that? Borrow, okay? So if you go into business and go, I'm going to wing it, as money comes in the door, I'm going to use that money to fund everything. You might get 2 or 3 years down the track because there's a little system called PAYG, which means you pay your tax as you go, but the tax office doesn't catch up with you for about 20 months after you've started in business, okay? And then all of a sudden, they want 2 years of taxes in 4 months, okay? And what's happened? We've all spent it, okay? Stay up to date with taxes. We do a service at CIA Tax, it's called Quarterly. You come and see us every quarter. We know exactly where you're at every quarter, okay? If you don't put aside money, we'll be telling you as you're going along so you're fully informed, but if you don't know how much money to put aside, you're going to end up in a great big heap. Tax planning. When do we do tax planning? Okay, when do we worry about our taxes? I can tell you most people do that 9 months after the financial year's ended. Okay. 3/4 time review I really push. Okay. End of March, do your figures, do your tax planning in that April, May, June period. It's too late. You know, after June 30, a lot of what we can do has passed. You know, whether it be superannuation or prepaying some expenses or whatever we need to do, leaving it to June 30 or after June 30, it's too late. The horse is bolted. So always do your tax planning prior to June 30. All right, what's boutique? Anyone want to have a shot at it? Boutique, I call finding a nice, safe estuary. It's a niche. We become the experts. Okay, so instead of going big here, we've made a decision we're going to have a look at the boutique side of things. Okay, we come up with new ideas. One of my clients in particular has a great idea, and without destroying his competitive advantage, he picked an industry where the HR laws have changed it so significantly that everything they used to install became too heavy, and all of a sudden you needed cranes, hoists, scaffolds and all those sorts of things. So labour cost went high, very, very high to do all that, and equipment high. So what he went out and did was create fiberglass replicas of everything they're doing, back to one man being able to help it. So he's become the expert in his industry. They're not putting these great big heavy things in anymore. They're putting in what I think look better anyway, fiberglass copies. Okay, so that's what I mean by becoming the expert. You've got to lead your field. Service, quality and price. Two of those things, service, quality and price, is enough to succeed in business. Okay, if you're going to go down boutique, you have to be competitive on your service, you have to be good at your service, you have to provide a good quality product, and the price has to be right as well. Less emphasis on price, but to go down the boutique route, you have to have all three bases covered. Any other business only has to cover two. You can have lousy service, we all know it, lousy service if your price is cheap. Okay, so normal business can get away with just getting two of those elements right. 3 for boutique. All right, hybrid. So I hope we've grasped what a boutique business is, and we've got what a big business is. A hybrid is what I really push, and I've got a couple of case studies in the notes that we're going to step through, including a fantastic business idea that I want someone to do with me. But the first one, without mentioning names, but someone who works at Harvey Norman gets into the media very often and whinges about retail sales and imports. He's always complaining. Okay. On the other hand, you had Dick Smith. And has anyone seen the Clever Dick service? Okay. So you've got Dick Smith, who's also a reseller. Okay. And now he's suffering as everyone else with tight margins, imports, all those sorts of things. So what's he gone out and done? He's created a service business. So what Clever Dick does, now we can all do it. Whatever our business is, we can always add an element of service to it. It's fixed pricing. You go onto the Clever Dick website, I've put it in your notes there, and I want a big screen TV that I've just bought somewhere, fitted. Click on it, $268 I think it was. If I want a wall mount, it was $368. So on percentage terms, I'd say the Clever Dick business is actually making more revenue or profit as a percentage, probably less revenue, but a greater percentage of profit by offering service. Okay. Now, jump on the website, you know, it's cleverdick.com.au, but it's an absolute brilliant example of how to add service to your business. Okay. Now, all of a sudden, he's not a big retail business anymore. Yes, he is a big retail business, but he's now got a service arm to it as well. Okay, and I think that's brilliant. I reckon that they are the first movers, and I think in time we'll start to see everyone do it. So it doesn't matter what you're in, and you can run your business past me at any time. There can always be a service element we can add to it, and I'm always happy to talk to people about it because accountants, what are we? Service. Okay, we love service. Okay, we know how to serve. Any business you're in can add service to it. All right, I thought I'd pick a tough one to talk about. Swimming pools. Okay, I want a swimming pool. What I don't want is it sitting there for 8 months, costing me money, needing cleaning, and all those sorts of things. If you go down to Bunnings or wherever you go and you look at the above ground pools, they're absolutely tragic. They look terrible. They don't look like they're going to last. But the concept's really good. Now, if anyone wants to take up this model with me, and I want to run through it tonight, as a business, I think it could work really well. Now you've got if you're a manufacturer and you have a swimming pool and you say, right, I'm going to make above ground pools. Okay, I'm going to make really good, classy above ground pools. Okay, why not? Okay, at the moment they're terrible. I'm going to install those pools. I'm going to build a deck around every pool. Okay, so I'm going to put the pool in there, and I've got some photos in the notes here. I'm going to build a deck around the pool. Okay, because they're not as big as an ordinary pool, and we haven't spent $80,000 putting one in, plus $40,000 for landscaping, which is what the standard price around Bayside seems to be. We can, do a bit of landscaping, put a deck around it, but what I'd advocate is an actual service around it. So there's pools in, very nice looking deck, a pull-out fence that you can, cover off all the safety issues, a lid that goes over it. Okay, so we get to the end of March, we drain the pool out, and we put a deck over the top of the deck, and all of a sudden for the other 8 months of the year, we haven't lost any backyard space. We've now got a nice deck area. Can you see where I'm going with this? Okay. You also now become a pool maintenance person. Okay, so you're starting to add services in. You say, yep, okay, for 4 months of the year we'll come around and we'll check your pool once every fortnight, and we're just adding layers to it. We'll sell you the chemicals. So we're not just someone who's importing pools or manufacturing pools. We're now a whole business model around it. And then come summer, we'll come and take away your lid, your decking lid. We'll store it for you. Again, what are we going to do? We're going to charge them for storage of the lid. At the end of summer, we're going to come and put it on. Can people get what I'm saying? Is there anything else we could add into that?
Yeah, you leave the water in during the winter.
What's going to happen to the water? Does anyone know?
It goes yuck.
Yep.
And mosquitoes breed in it.
Mm-hmm.
But in America, when all the people deserted their houses with the GFC, and the mosquito problem became such an issue, the government went around and put little fish in free of charge. And the fish ate all the larvae. And at the end of the winter period for here, you just filter the water and clean it out. And charge for it.
Charge for it again. I like it. So look.
Water.
Yeah, can you tell them an account? That's good. Now, what I'm really trying to get across here, I'm not saying this is a good model. I think it is. It is, and if anyone wants to take it up with me, I'll certainly explore it. What I'm trying to get across here is, if we start adding layers, okay, and I just picked this as an example this afternoon because I think it's a good idea. I think there's a need there. A nice pool, a nice deck that becomes a deck over winter, and as Ashley points out, rightfully so, we can use it as a fish pond during the winter months as well. It's.
And then you eat them in the spring.
Yeah, let's see if we can put some barramundi in and eat them as we go. Yeah. So I mean, that's what I wanted to get across. I really wanted to get across that, if we're going to go big business, okay, now Gerber, I'm sure we've read it, Gerber E-Myth is probably the best book that I've ever read on growing a big business, okay, because it does talk about systemising. We have to fund the business correctly, okay, and we have to be aware of all the financing issues that go along with that, because it isn't easy, because I see it all the time with my clients. They go in, all of a sudden they try to build up a business, very, very quickly, and they get caught out by the cash flow. All right, what's my one key point? Anyone remember it? Who said not my money? Yeah, good man. I like you, Brian. Valid. Just remember that. All the money that comes in the door when you're in business, it's not all yours. Don't spend it all, okay? It's funny we're here, and I have to mention this story because 6 weeks ago I did the Melbourne Ironman, and we come running right past here, actually. So as I was walking in, one of my friends actually asked me, "Are you nervous?" And I said, pretty much after standing at the start line of that stupid event, faced with 1.5 metre waves, no, I'm not nervous of anything anymore, because I'd had 11 months of swimming lessons prior to that, and it was an absolute buzz to get through it. And for those who don't know, 13 hours and 3 minutes, and I'm sure the nurses in my nursing home will hear that story as well for the rest of their days. But I got through, and we did run past here, so it was an absolute terrific event. So as you know, that was that original book. This is my latest book. It's only come out in the last week. Big versus boutique is being updated, so it's actually in this book as well. There's one chapter in this book, I think it's the longest chapter or the second longest chapter in the book, which basically goes through a lot of what we've spoken about tonight. There's another couple of chapters in the book I want to speak briefly on. The book's called Financial Distraction. Okay, what's financial distraction? John, what's financial distraction?
The money, worried about money and stuff takes you away from actually what you should be doing.
Yep. Do we all know? Do we all have financial distraction? You know, does it matter where we're at? Have we all got it? Yeah. Okay. Here's some revealing statistics that really, impacted on me when I was writing this book. 54% of people do not have funds put aside for unexpected costs. In other words, bills that come along, we don't have enough money to cover them. 37% of people are concerned about the ability to retire. Am I ever going to be able to retire? We see this all the time. 25% of people are struggling to meet household expenses. 22% are worried about losing their job. 14% worry about keeping up with debt. And 7% worry about losing their home. 6% worry about paying for children's school costs, and quite often now we see grandparents are doing that, especially in the accounting practice. I'm seeing a lot of grandparents paying for children's secondary school. Let's throw in divorces, tax, ill health and investment risks. We all have distractions. Now put your hands up if you haven't got any.
I'll show you the light.
Yeah, exactly. So we've all got them. Okay. My book, which you can buy tonight. It's full of case studies. I've been doing this for 17 years now. When I wrote the book, it was 16 years. Basically, I've been through it all with the clients, and I've tried to put it into case study format to show you how to handle it as well. So it's pretty well generically written. But two of the chapters I want to talk about, just briefly, is turning bad debts into good debts. Okay. And making share market investments safer than property. Right, who believes me? Marie, I know you will. Anyone want to take a stab at that? Greg? Yeah, no one's jumping on board. Why are shares safer than property? Anyone want to believe me? No one. One person. Exactly. We cannot insure property, but we can insure the value of property, correct? The capital value of property, but we can actually protect the value of shares. Okay. Now, the reason I'm pushing this line at the moment is because rental yields are a lot lower than dividend yields. Now, when we give up some of our dividend yield, we can actually use that dividend yield to pay for protection. Okay. So we can hedge, they call it, is the technical term, protect the value of shares where we can't protect the value of property. Now, I'm invested, myself personally, in residential, rural and commercial property. Okay, so I am a property investor as well. But what I'm seeing with most people is they don't have that balance. They're just going, I'm a property investor, that's it, I don't believe in shares. Well, if we look at the growth rates of both over time, well, shares, do outperform, not by much, but they do outperform. But they have periods where you're going to get property prices stagnating. For example, what's property going to do in the next 5 years? Who wants a chance?
Double.
Someone up the back saying down. Okay. What's the view? Is it going up? Up? Down? Sideways?
What area? Depends. What sort of property? Depends on the property.
Depends on the property. How much does it cost to hold a property for the year? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not against property. As you know, I invest in property as well. But as an accountant, I'll tell you it's about 10% per annum. Okay? So you've got the cost of capital, whether you've got your own money or you've had to borrow at 5.5%, 6%, whatever it is. You've got rates, repairs, land taxes, ongoing renovations, all those sorts of costs. Body corporate if you're in an apartment somewhere. Actually, that's an aside. Who believes in apartments at the moment? Anyone? Are they building an awful lot of them? Yeah. Nah, exactly. Be wary. It'll take a while to catch up again. All right, so we've got all these on costs of about 10% per annum. What are we getting? Who wants to tell me what an average rent yield is?
3.5%.
Okay, so let's say 3.5. So it's costing us 6 or 7% per annum to hold this property. Is property going to go up 21% over the next 3 years? No? So why are we saying property is good?
It's a case of two. So some people have property already. So some people ask, well, should we sell it now and do something else and buy back in later? And then you got the sale fees and it's time for you to get back in, so you wait it out. Or...
Yeah, as I said, I'm not biased myself. Look, I am biased, I prefer shares, but I am invested in everything. I just think, you know, before we run around and jump in and buy another property, which everyone seems to do at the moment, consider that if I'm not getting the yield, am I losing money if I don't get the capital growth? Okay, and accountant's boring, we do the numbers, we see that. It's an interesting one. Compare that to shares at the moment, and I don't think I'm going to convince many people by the sound of it, but shares have a dividend yield at the moment of about 6%. Okay, 6%. How much does it cost to buy and sell shares? Nothing. Okay. What does it cost to buy a property? State revenue needs you, so keep buying property. We're struggling at the moment. So they're just things I like to look at. We've got high yield. Okay. So one of the chapters in the book, it's my favourite chapter, is to at least get people thinking about it. Okay. It is safer. Now, as an example, if you give up a couple of % of your yield, bring it back to a property yield of around 4%, you can protect it at about 10% down. So if you've bought $100,000 worth of shares, you take out the insurance policy, which might cost you about 1.5% to 2% at the most, you'll always be protected at 90,000. Okay, so even if the market halves, so you've got your dividend yield that's come in during the year of 4,000, so over a year, the most you could ever lose, it'd be about $6,000. Okay, and in doing that, you've still got full exposure to the upside. So I'm really trying to get this line across to people at the moment. If the share market was 7,000 points 5 years ago, 4 years ago, and it's 5,000 points now, or thereabouts, 5,200, is there a bit of upside left to come? Okay, it's a lot higher 5 years ago. That's one of the chapters in the book. It's my favourite chapter. So I thought I'd ram that one home. Bad debts. Who knows what a bad debt is? What's a bad debt? Bad debts? Is a credit card debt a bad debt? Yeah. Exactly. Is that property example I was talking about, where there's no capital growth, is that a bad debt? Right. I'd argue it is. But it's not making money. But look, technically it is a good debt. The definition for good debt is what I can claim a tax deduction for. Okay, so bad debt is your credit cards, it's your home mortgage, just store cards, it's a personal car that you're not using for business. We've got to pay the interest on those loans in after-tax dollars. Okay, so we've got to, you know, out of that $100 we earn, if we're the average taxpayer, we lose $34 in tax, and we've got $66 left over to pay that interest bill on that asset. So that's bad debt. If it's good debt, that same $100 we get a tax deduction for, we've still got $100 left to pay off. Okay, so good debt and bad debt. Anyone heard of debt recycling? Anyone heard of heart? I'm sure Tim has. Okay, this is something, just to give you a bit of tax history, and this is in the book as well. In 2004, there was a famous case that the tax office won, and it said you cannot capitalise interest. Okay, so when we capitalise interest, it means we're not paying our interest bill, we're using the income we receive from an investment and use that to pay off bad debt. In other words, let's, for example, we have a rental property. Okay, this rental property is receiving rent. We use that rent to pay off our credit cards or our personal debt. Okay, and then the interest bill on that loan is going up. Okay, because we're not paying it. So the loan this year is 100,000, next year it's 106,000, the year after it's 107,000, you know, whatever it is, compounding up and up. So we're not paying our debt, okay? The tax office won the case on the basis that you can't do it if you do it just for a tax reason. Okay, so if you turn around and say, the only reason I'm doing this is to save on tax, the tax office will win, okay? But if your reason is, I want to pay off my home loan first because I want to protect that from asset protection and the lenders. Is that a reason? It is, okay? Now, I've been a pretty conservative accountant in the last 5 years in relation to this Hart case because it did put the fear in all of us. But what we're starting to see now is a whole bunch of tax rulings go through the tax office where people are putting to the tax office these scenarios and says, well, my reason is I want to pay off my share portfolio, you know, last. I view that as a risky asset. I don't want to pay off those debts. I want to pay off my home loan so it's protected for my children. And they're coming through and they're saying, yep, that's okay. Another example is businesses. Okay, this one's out there. I probably won't give you advice, but for those of us in business, okay, we might have $500,000 worth of business expenses a year coming through. All right, and we've got $1 million loan against our home because we've bought in Brighton somewhere. What people are doing is this $500,000, or say $600,000 worth of income comes in the door, and instead of paying your $500,000 worth of expenses every year, you're using that $600,000 to pay off your loan, and you're borrowing to borrowing to pay back your business expenses. Who thinks that's legitimate? Anyone prepared to put a hand up to that? Do you understand my example?
Sounds okay. You've got to pay tax on that money you're paying off domestic debt, the balance. It's a big whack.
Yeah, good point. Well, the answer is, it is. So, you know, it is legal. You know, we are seeing the tax office are at a point now where they're almost too scared to come out and challenge it in public. But these rulings are starting to go through because people are coming to see their accountants and going, well, can I do it? And we're going, let's put a ruling in. And they're coming back in the affirmative. Okay, so I'd never give this advice at a seminar like we are here to say, go do it. Okay, get a ruling. Okay, because the tax office does have their stated position that says if you only do it for tax purposes, it's not going to hold up. But if you do have another legitimate reason, there is no reason why the tax office can stop you doing it in this way. Some other tips: who pays for their rental expenses like repairs and you know, rates and all that sort of thing? We all pay it out of our bank account. John, could we add that to our loan? Yeah. John's from the Bank of Melbourne. Okay, so if you're borrowing to pay back your rental property expenses, yeah, it's clear. One of my favourite chapters in the book as well. Just briefly, property and super, who's heard of that one? Okay, really getting a big push at the moment. Is there anything better than being self-employed and operating out of your own business premises? No, there's nothing better. Why? Because we're capped at how much money we can put into superannuation each year. Okay, all of a sudden we've now got a property, we're going to pay rent into our superannuation funds. So it is a perfect investment if you're involved in operating out of a premises, whether it be a pub or an accounting practice, to really look at ways, or it might be a design studio, whatever you're doing, you know, really look at ways of getting a property into superannuation to be able to increase your contributions into superannuation while they're capped. Okay, up until the last couple of weeks, we're always talking about it being completely tax-free. We are moving the goalposts, and that is the danger with superannuation, that income over 100,000 is going to be taxed. And it's something to be wary of. If you were lucky enough to get your property into super, you know, in the last year or so, or earlier, you're never going to be taxed. But if we do make a capital gain into the future, they are talking about taxing it at 10 cents on the dollar.
Still better than our sense.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not the end of the world. Death taxes are in the book. Who knows about death taxes? What's the biggest death tax we have?
A couple of gains tax.
a big one. Best one? 2 people have 2 tax-free thresholds. Have a joint assessment for Centrelink. All those sorts of things. What happens when one goes? Careful. One goes. All of a sudden they're down to a single threshold. Okay, so what we find in a lot of cases is if we've got elderly parents or relatives or whoever, make sure you give away, if you've got a mum and the assets are all going to go to dad, for example, okay, all of a sudden they're going to have an assessment based on the total amount of assets, not half the assets. Okay, so make sure you look at giving away. I always try to tell people this. You get some gratitude for it as well. Make sure you pay out half the will if the other person's not going to need them as well. It's the nasty sting in the tail. Nursing home assessments, all those sorts of things are affected by it. Death, believe it or not, is a good tax planning opportunity, if it's ever good. And that's one way to get out there. So look, they're probably the main points I wanted to talk about tonight. My key point from a business growth point of view, and I can't ram it home enough, is put some money aside. Every dollar that comes in, sit down with your accountants and go, I'm going to put aside 25, 30, 35% or whatever it needs to be. So when I do get to the end of the financial year, those pains of having to, go to the mortgage or go to the, not pay our creditors for a while to keep up is going to be there. So from a business growth point of view, work out a percentage and make sure you attribute that, into a bank account that's separate that you can't touch. And we'll get out of a lot of trouble. Now, I'll throw it open if anyone has got questions on any topic. I'm happy to answer anything. I hope there is a question. Think of one. Because if you come in next week, I'll charge you for them. So now's always a good chance to ask a question. Ashley, thank you.
I think I might have read in your book about how to put residential investment property transferred in specie to a self-funding super fund.
You wouldn't have read that in my book.
Sorry?
No, not residential.
No, there's a way to do it.
Yep.
Apparently, we met it somewhere else. Something like if you operate your business from the residential property for a period of time, I think it's 12 months or something, then it's established by use as commercial use. Therefore, it's residential title, you can transfer in specie to a self-funding super fund.
Yeah, it's a very good point. One of the things we try to do is we try to get assets into superannuation, especially the business assets as I've mentioned. Okay, now if I transfer a shop or a farm or a factory or whatever into my superannuation fund, there is a clear exemption. Okay, it's called business real property. So it is the only way. If I have my home and I wanted to move it into superannuation, I can't because it's residential property. Okay, now we can also do this. Another point to mention is we can do it stamp duty free as well. When there's no change in beneficial ownership, in other words, I own my factory and I move it into my superannuation fund and I'm the member in the superannuation fund, it's also stamp duty free. And if we're a small business, we can generally make it capital gains tax free by bringing in all the CGT rollover reliefs as well. Okay. The problem is you can't move residential. It's probably one of the most often questions I'm asked. You cannot move residential property into super because it's not business real property. It's just one of the rules. But Ashley does point out a very good point. Still can't do it if it's in your own name. You can't do it. If the building, and we see it all the time, we have quite a few houses out there that are being used as doctor's surgeries, for example, or a dentist or whatever. You can, if there's a business lease in place, again, get a ruling, but it can be rolled over in. Okay? Has to be business use, purely business use. Can't be residential in any way. Yep.
Can I ask you a question about first-time buyers grant?
I'll try.
So my son wants to buy a house.
Yep.
I believe that there's the new laws just come in, it's $10,000 for new property, but also is it 40% discount on stamp duty for existing and new?
Tim, can you help us with that one?
Yeah, there are stamp duty savings on owner-occupied properties, whether it's a first-time buyer or for a primary purpose. So if your mum and dad sold a home, buying home to live in, and then beyond that there's stamp duty savings for first-time buyers. So there's a double dip there. So I haven't got a calculator to give you a figure, but it's all over the SRO website. Savings, there are savings, yeah. And on typically a $450,000 home, about $14,000 savings, including your $7,000 grant. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Up the back, Yep. Who knows what a testamentary trust is, or a testamentary will? Not many. They are the greatest will of all time. Basically, you know, it comes back to, I'll use an example, is probably the best way to put it. Someone like myself, you know, if I die, all my assets would go to my children, okay? Someone would look after my children, presumably, so, you know, because my children are young, they'd go to my sister or my brother or someone like that, okay? They would then earn income on those investments because my children are too young and be paying tax at adult rates on it. If it goes to the benefit of the children, it is a maximum tax rate of 47% if it's just in their name. So what we do is we create a separate being, okay? It's called a testamentary will. It's called controlling from the grave. Okay, so all your assets go into this testamentary will, okay, that's maintained for the benefit of your children, or it might be a handicapped person or someone like that, until they reach a certain age, okay? And it shelters that money separately at normal concessional tax rates rather than the penalty rates if it goes straight through. Make sense? Okay. Bugger all difference too. You know, it might cost you $150 to get a will. I think it's about $250 to get a testamentary will. There's not a lot of price difference between the two. Okay. If you've got kids in particular, or someone with a handicap in the family that you want to look after, almost essential.
There's a lot of golfers around.
A lot of
Golfers. People with a handicap in the family.
All right, anyone else? Questions?
This is a proper deal.
Tell us a bit more about how they're insured with their portfolio.
Yeah, look, I'm happy to talk anyone through it. It's my favourite topic. But what we do is, I'll give you a numbers example, okay, and I'll expand a little bit on what we did before. I've got $100,000 worth of stock, okay? What's my favourite stock? Does anyone here, John, know? Okay, STW, jot it down, my favourite stock of all time. All it is one stock on the stock exchange that owns the top 200 stocks, okay? So if I'm buying one stock in STW, it's buying that company itself, it buys the top 200. So all you're getting when you buy that one stock is instant diversity. Okay, so it's my favourite stock because it's cheap and efficient. In my share portfolio, it's my number one stock, okay? So if I want to protect the value of STW, okay, I'm a little bit worried about the market, anything could happen, so I want to take an insurance policy against it. It's a very easy one to protect because it's the most liquid traded stock out there from a derivatives point of view. At about 10% down, so I've just spent $100,000, I decide you can actually protect that whole 100,000, but the more you protect, the more it costs. So you sit there and you go, all right, well, I can afford to lose $10,000 on that, okay? So I'm going to set my insurance policy, it's called a put option for those people who know a little bit about them, to protect the value at $90,000. Does insurance cost? What's that going to cost me? Anyone want to guess? Okay. Believe it or not, it's worked on volatility. If the market's going up and down, the people that issue these insurance policies, if you like, get nervous, and what are they going to do? Charge more, ramp up the costs. At the moment, volatility, believe it or not, is actually getting down near historical lows. It doesn't feel like it on a day-to-day basis. But when you look at the number they use for pricing volatility, it's really low. It's 12%, and I've got to remind myself continually, actually, it's actually quite a good time, cheap, to protect. So I've decided I want to protect $90,000 worth of that portfolio. At the moment, that'd cost you about $1,500, okay? Now that $1,500 traditionally is not tax deductible because it's deemed capital in nature. It's to protect something, okay? There's another little step that I do that makes it tax deductible, but I won't cover that tonight. So we've now protected it at $90,000. The worst case happens, the market falls to $80,000 or $70,000. You're sitting there at $90,000. Presumably you've collected $6,000 worth of dividends over the year. You've spent your $1,500 on insurance, and whoever's doing the numbers, you know, you're effectively $94,500. So you've lost $5,500 over the year as opposed to someone who's lost a heap more if the market's crashed. Okay? But the best thing about that, and it's for numbers people who get excited about numbers like me, is that if my share investments have halved, say I bought them at 100,000 and it's now gone to 50,000 and I had no protection in place, I've got to wait an awful, awful long time for it to go from 50,000 back over 100,000. Well, the beauty of protection is if the market goes from 100 to 50, I'm protected at 90. My break-even point's 90,000. Okay? Well, my starting point's 90,000. So if the market, I then re-protect again at the 50,000 at the new lower level, it's only got to move $5,000 or $6,000 and I'm back to where I'm not sure if I'm really getting that across. But because the market has fallen so far, if I wasn't protected, I've got to wait a long time for it to get back to where I was. If I was protected, it only has to move a little way to get me back in front. If you want to jot this down, it's the most interesting article I've ever read. It's from Ken Henry. Now, Ken Henry was on the board of the Reserve Bank of Australia, a very, very smart man. He wrote an article called Sequencing Risk. Okay? I'm glad you asked me this question. I really do, thank you. I'll buy a beer. So what sequencing risk is it says, if I invested 5 years ago in the share market at 7,000, when the market was at 7,000 points, it's at 5,200 now, and I held my shares for a 10-year period, my return, overall returns, are going to be a heck of a lot different to the person who bought the shares 10 years prior at 2,000, where the ASX was. So what he's trying to call it is, my returns will be greater if I got in at a lower cost base, obviously, than if I got in at a higher cost base and the market came down. So if I was 2,000, the market went to 7,000 and is now back to 5,000, I'm still a long way up. Just ask all those Commonwealth Bank people that bought their shares at $7 and watched them crash to $25 in the global financial crisis, and they're now 70-something again. Okay, so your returns are greatly affected by the sequence and when you buy those shares. It's almost madness. You know, margin lending, I've got a little spiel that I talk about. I call it dumb. It's absolutely dumb, margin lending. Okay, because you're faced with this sequencing list. You know, you've got to go about it with a layer of protection. Products like AXA North and MLC are starting to bring out products that are very good, but hideously expensive in doing exactly what I'm saying. You know, they give you that reassurance that your portfolio will never lose money. All they're doing is taking a profit margin for doing that and then going just paying a market maker on the side. What I talk about in my book, and I talk about quite passionately, is do it yourself. It's so much cheaper. Okay, it's not that hard. Come down to my office, I'll teach you how to do it. I'll charge you. I'll teach you how to do it. Not that much. We're cheap. Ashley.
With that example we were talking about, you talked about the drops to 90, so you're about 94,500.
Yep.
Then you based your then future growth on the 50,000 it dropped down to.
Correct, yeah.
Was there another step in there where you sell them and buy them back at the 50?
No, well, in that example, if you had that protection at 90,000 and it dropped to 50,000, yep, at the end of the year you'd be given 40,000. Okay? So that's the value of your insurance contract, if you like. So there is no extra step. You collect your 40,000 from that and then you reinvest at 50,000 and then any pickup you get. And that's what sequencing risk is. Now, it's easy for the planning industry as a whole, and I'm not going to bag them, to just say, oh, passage of time, passage of time. But if you don't consider the sequence of time, you're never really going to beat it overall. And Ken Henry's article, it's actually written in fairly well, layman's terms, is a very good starting point to read it.
So he's just including the opportunity cost.
He is, very much so. Yep. So.
I think I read in the Age that if you run your business to a trust, you can deduct school fees and golf club fees.
No, it's not true, unfortunately. No, look, 20 years ago, I think you could. You could even claim hairdressing costs if you appeared on camera. But no, now, no, nothing.
With private school fees, the building funds, now they often break it down in the bill. So the building fund donation you make is tax deductible. There's a fee component of it.
Yeah, generally if you've got a $20,000 a year school fee, they'll probably have about 10% of it will be going to the school building fund. Okay, and if you've paid that element, the 2,000 of your 20,000, that element's tax deductible. Okay, who read the papers this week? What are they talking about? Curbing donation costs and those sort of costs, building fund costs. Okay, so we've got a government that's running out of money, so that is certainly one thing they're going to hit hard. Back?
Just on that line, the self-education costs.
Yep.
I don't think people are aware of that.
Another one, yeah. Yeah, basically what they're talking about is, it's a good point, you know, if I went to uni, and I'm sick of going to uni, so I won't be again, but if you pay a $10,000 fee, okay, and I work as an accountant, so I work in the field I'm working in learning about, I can claim that as a tax deduction, okay? So if I have a $10,000 cost and I'm an average taxpayer, I'll get $3,500 back, okay? Again, another thing they're clamping down on, what they're saying is from 1 July, and I guess, what is everyone doing May 15, anyway? Budget night. Greatest night of all time. But I it's fantastic, budget night, it's great. No one wants to come around? I'm on my own usually. But no, that is certainly one of the things that's going to come out. It's been preempted, very good point. So generally when they preempt things like this, they are going to maximise the deduction. I think it was at $2,000, which is nothing, you know, because you're only going to get $600 of that back in ballpark terms. I'd be prepaying my education costs for next year before budget night. In fact, this year I think we're going to see an incredibly desperate government and a lot of things going to happen on budget night that we're not going to like. Do it before. So if there's anything we're thinking about doing before June 30, okay, do it now.
So self-education expenses, what else can we look at?
Anything at all. I think they might even try to curb work-related expenses or motor vehicle. They already are with fringe benefits tax. I just basically think, you know, as a layman, and I'm getting more and more cynical as I get older, I think this budget in particular is going to have a lot of things we're not going to like in it. You know, if you are going to bring expenses forward, now's the time to do it. Get in before May 15. Hope I'm wrong. All right. Any more? Susan.
Oh, sorry. Explain that the debt tax situation in the elderly couple with the will.
Yeah. Okay. My point on death taxes was, when you have two people, you have two thresholds for Centrelink and you have two thresholds for tax. When one person dies, all the assets go to that person and they're assessed differently. Okay, so they're now one person with a lot more assets and a lot more income. Quite often pension will drop out at that point. Okay, and a lot of benefits you receive with healthcare cards. So what I tell clients to do, especially if they're in their 80s or their 90s and they don't need a pile of money anymore, now's the time to pay it out. Okay, hanging on to the family home's fine. There's generally never any issues with that. But if you've got a whole bunch of superannuation or you've got a whole bunch of shares and you don't need them, start handing them out. Okay, at least a surviving member, as one of my clients once said, I'm giving it all in now so I get a bit of gratitude, because later I'll get nothing. I won't feel it. Testamentary trust, another word, and I don't think I described it that well before, it's a living trust. Okay, so the assets then go into the trust and they're assessed to whichever beneficiary is receiving it. And that is another good way of getting around that. Yeah. Andrew.
Can you talk a little bit about self-managed super and borrowing within self-managed super for property purchase, for example?
Yeah, there's nothing better in my mind, and I will take credit for it. In 2007, my thesis was one of the ones that were tabled to bring about this change at the ATO review for borrowing in superannuation. Just as an example, we have $150,000 or $200,000 in superannuation. We want to go buy a $400,000 property, okay? We can use that $200,000 to buy the property and borrow the other $200,000, okay? So in the past, we haven't been able to borrow inside superannuation funds, okay? Now we can. They use an instalment warrant. I won't get too tied up in all the lingo tonight. But as a practical person, You've got rent coming in, which pays down that $200,000 loan a lot quicker, but what else is going into super that helps pay it down? Exactly. What's it going to be after July 1? No, 9.25, it's going up. So our money coming into superannuation can be used to pay off the debt very quickly, as well as the rent coming in can pay off the debt as well.
With those loans, I understand the establishment costs are higher because there's more work for the bank to do it.
Yep.
Do you have any ideas why they charge a much higher interest rate, even though it's secured over residential property?
I won't insult any bankers here, but I really do think that that was the case at the start. We can bag Westpac, I think, but they were probably the worst. The first ones I did in 08 and 09 were about $10,000 in fees to set up one of these superannuation loans. Okay, they're now down more realistically at around $1,500, providing everything's in order. If they've got to get their lawyers involved to look at it, yeah, exactly. Right, the way I get around this, okay, you've got your home. Luckily, you've got $500,000 worth of equity in that loan. Using that same example, me can be the lender to my super fund. So my super fund can use that $200,000 it has, okay, and borrow the other $200,000 it needs to buy the property in super from me. Okay, now I'm not going to charge all those fees, and I'm going to, even if I charge a traditional interest rate, whatever I'm paying, I'm getting back anyway. Okay, so that's the way to get around it. You know, never ever just go and consider, I'm going to go get a super fund loan. Consider all the other options as well, and you being the lender is the best one usually. And guess what? When you take out a super fund loan, you're offering personal guarantees anyway. You know, so from a risk point of view, whether you're using your home or not, there's no difference at all. Okay, off the back.
Are there no arm's length rules to do that?
Sorry, sir?
Are there no rules about big arm's length?
Yeah, it has to be arm's length, okay? But at the end of the day, you know, invariably you're getting your money at 6% and you're lending it to your bank, to your super fund at 6%. Okay, you can't lend it at 1%. You know, it just won't hold up. It has to be, and I always argue whatever you're paying is commercial. Okay, to be safe.
You lose, your asset protection situation there to do from the super fund because currently my house is not in my name.
Yep.
My wife's name. From an asset protection purpose, so if I actually go out from the super fund, is there a chance to lose that in asset protection?
So what you're wanting to lend to the super fund using your house, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, as soon as you sign, you know, a personal guarantee or an item of real estate over, of course, you know, it's now up for grabs. So, yep, you are opening yourself up there.
I think also the asset in the super fund is quarantined from bankruptcy.
It is.
So your stuff, what you've got in your super fund is protected.
Yep, and that's the other way of looking at it. If you build up assets in superannuation, okay, and you're in a high-risk profession and you go broke, for example, your assets inside superannuation to a degree, which for most people will be fine, are protected. So if I go broke, whatever, my assets in superannuation can't be touched. So it is a very good thing to build up assets in superannuation. Bit of everything. I call it the 3 pillars. Anyone know what they are? Read my book. Tax effective investment, okay, number 1. What's tax effective investment? Shares, rental properties, whatever you're into, okay. Number 2, pillar number 2, your own home, okay. Owning our own home is great because it gives us choices, it gives us ability to borrow, to buy other things, and a bit of security. And the third one's super. So building up the asset classes in all 3 is equally as important, in my mind.
Just on the death taxes issue.
Yeah, it's topical.
Tell people about the 16.5% tax on distributions to non-dependent beneficiaries out of the super fund.
There are, yep, and that's a good one. Thanks for raising that, because it's one thing I normally do mention at just about every seminar, and I'd forgotten to today.
What was the question?
The question is, thank you, the question is, if I die, and when I die, and I will die, when my money comes out of superannuation, if there's money left in it and goes to a non-dependent, in other words, my grown-up children, is that money taxed? Yeah, it is. 16.5% tax, okay? The day before I die, I pull all the money out of superannuation and put in my own name, and then it's distributed to my children, is that money taxed? No. So the answer is the day before you die, go to the bank, go to your super fund and pull the money out. There's nothing more important on your last day on this planet. Trust me.
Is that the same whether it's in the accumulation fund or a pension fund?
Exactly, and there's some strategies we use. Like when there's two people alive, in other words, mum and dad, we're generally not as harsh on this, okay? But if dad dies or mum dies, we'll then, really look at pulling a lump sum out. Other things we do, it's only the concessional amounts you're taxed at 16.5% on. The bits you have put money into super out of your own money and you haven't claimed a tax deduction for, doesn't attract any tax. Okay, so now we're at the age of 60, we're in good health, what are we going to do?
You're retired?
Yep, retired, good point.
Take all your money out of super.
Take your money out of super
And put it back into super.
and recontribute it. Because I pull it out at the age of 60, I pay no tax, get a bronze statue of Peter Costello with some of the change, doesn't get any better than that. And then I reinvest it back into superannuation as a contribution from myself that I'm not claiming a tax deduction for, and you've washed it out. So when I do get to 80 or 90, there are no elements of tax. Correct. Okay. Now, if we're a couple prior to the age of 65, we can put 450,000 each in. That's 3 years of 150,000 all at once. Once we get over the age of 65, we're restricted to putting 150,000 a year into superannuation at that point. And we've got to pass a work test. Work test is very easy to pass. It's 40 hours in 1 month. So, go work somewhere for a month and then you can pass the work test. Much easier if you do it before the age of 65. Yep. I'm glad you came, Ashley. It's great. Thank you.
I've got a question about trust. I like the concept of using trust for property ownership.
Yep.
For both asset protection and tax distribution and all that. But trust only lasts for, was it 70 something years?
80 years,
80
yep.
years.
Mm-hmm.
At that 80-year mark, I think it's the assets have to be sold and distributed.
Vested, yep.
Is there a way to, for want of a better word, roll it over so they don't have to be sold?
Yeah, there is. Have we got a lawyer who can talk on that? Is that something you can talk on?
No, I'm not an accountant.
Okay. No, there are certainly, yeah.
Antiquities of their churches were set up in the early 60s.
Yep.
Just try to stop people passing the money intergenerationally for a long time like they do in Europe.
I know how I do it as an accountant. I'd certainly be doing it from a CGT point of view and if they were business assets from a rollover point of view. But I mean, in reality, 80 years is a long time. I don't think I've even got one trust that's even close to 80 years.
Well, you're a young fella.
Oh yeah, well, I've been around a
You
while.
might have a
Yeah. But I mean, I've got a lot of elderly clients too. They might be 40 or 50-year-old trusts. I don't think they'll ever get to 80 years before the money's used for something. But look, it's a good point. I probably don't have a full answer for. I know what I do as an accountant, but as a legal person, I'm not sure what I'd do there.
So just back on that previous question about taking your money out, or all of your money in super out after you're 60 or before 65.
Yep.
So then you're not going to get any tax taken out on that, then you put it back in, is that right?
Correct, yeah. So if you're retired and at the age of 60, you pay 0 tax on your lump sum withdrawals, okay? So you can pull it out. Another point remiss of me that I haven't mentioned, who knows about transition to retirement?
Could I just point out that before,
I'll talk about it in a second.
that with that, is it helpful to put it into a new super fund and not the same account?
No, it doesn't matter. It'll be the same fund, but it'll be, your member balance will be, no, you certainly can be the same fund, no issues at all.
Okay, so no penalties.
Correct.
Putting it back in the second time. Is that between the ages of 60 and 65?
Yeah, it gets harder after the age of 65 because you have to pass the work test and you are limited to 150,000 a year. So it's always good to retire at 60 or around then, 62, 63, and take advantage of it while you can. Okay. Yep. Transition to retirement, anyone over the age of 60 and not doing it, beat yourself up at the end of the day. 60 is even more important. 55 is a good point as well. if we have money in accumulation parts of superannuation, is it being taxed? Okay, the earnings off it? Yep. So let's say we've got $300,000 in super. It's earning $8,000, or 8% I should say. So it's 8, 16, $24,000. It's paying 15% tax. Do you see it? Do you pay it? No. Okay. The super fund pays it, not you. So you don't see it. But it is being paid. It is law. Tax is being paid. You go into transition to retirement phase, how much tax is being paid on that earning? Nothing. Okay. So if anyone you know is over the age of 60 and they haven't at least considered it, or in my case, I'd be telling them to do it irrespective, go onto that transition retirement mode, purely for the main reason is that the amounts coming out aren't taxed and the amounts inside aren't taxed either, completely tax-free. Mad if you don't do it.
What's that? Is that a box on the tax return or something? Transition?
No, it's in your super fund. Okay, so you've got to notify your super fund that I want to go into a transition to retirement phase. If it's a self-managed super fund, you ring up yourself and go, I want to go into transition to retirement. And you go, okay. If you're an accountant, you go, yeah, okay, we can do that. But yeah, write a self-minute. But no, look, if you're in a host or a C-bus or whatever, it is just a matter of ringing them up and getting the forms filled in and getting it transferred over. All
But don't you have to apply from the job?
55, you can do it. The problem with from 55 to 60, what you do take out of superannuation is taxed. So generally, unless you've got a whopping big balance of superannuation at the age of 55, it's better to wait to the age of 60. Like if you've got $1 million in super at 55, you are better off going to transition to retirement. But if you're down there at 100,000, you're going to be working a while as well. But the benefits you get from pulling money in and out don't stack up versus a higher balance. So 55, consider it. 60, beat yourself up if you're not doing it. People of Australia will thank you though. Julia will. She'll be happy. All right. Any more? Now's the chance. Well, look, thanks for coming along. We've gone a little bit over time, but I really appreciate you coming along and listening to me. And tonight only, which a lot of you would have seen on the email, my book is here, and it's half price tonight, and next week it's back to normal price. So I'll even sign it for you if you want me to. And yes, very good point. It's tax deductible. So.